Hi, I'm Beth, creator of dryitcanit.com. This channel is devoted to learning how to can, dehydrate, and use canned and dehydrated foods in your home, as well as me sharing original recipes. Today, I'm going to make a pressure-canned cheesecake. Before we get started, I want you to know that this is not an approved method to make cheesecake. Cheesecake is not something that is approved by the USDA. It does have flour, it does have eggs, it does have cream cheese. That said, I use a data logger, and I've made this recipe before and have got the temperature up to that 240-degree mark, which is important for killing botulism spores. Also, the sour cream and the cream cheese in here is somewhat acidic, not acidic enough to not have botulism spores, but there's also sugar content. So I believe that the combination of those things keep this recipe pretty safe. That said, I'm not a scientist, I can't guarantee anything, but the USDA also says that egg yolks need to be cooked until they're hard. Food should always be dehydrated in the refrigerator and never on the counter. You understand where I'm going with this. So let's get started on how to make this cheesecake. Last time I made the cheesecake, I made all of it in these 8-ounce jars, half-pint jars, and it worked well. I got the temperature up over 240 degrees, but I would like to get that temperature over 240 degrees a little bit longer, just to have that extra level of comfort. So today I'm going to make it mostly in this size jar. And the reason I'm doing that is because the jar is wider and shorter, so it will not be as dense. In other words, the heat doesn't have to penetrate as far. It's wide, but it's not as high. I will be using my data logger in that to see what kind of a temperature I get with that. I'm comfortable that the recipe is good either way, but if you make this recipe, please do so only in a half-pint size container. I'm not testing it for a 1-pint size container. These jars are a little bit harder to find. I will look online and see if I can find some, and I will put a link below for the jars, which will be an affiliate link if you're interested in buying the jars. Otherwise, I feel comfortable that you can make them in this half-pint size jar, but again, just be aware of what I said earlier. So to start the recipe, I'm starting with 2 cups of crushed graham crackers. Now I could have crushed these a little bit more finely. I actually crushed a number of them and put the leftovers in a jar to seal for future use. But I'm not a chef, I'm a home cook. So if they're not perfectly fine, I'm okay with that. To that, I'm adding a 1/2 cup of melted butter. Now, many people will say to use unsalted butter because they think the flavors get more intense when you're pressure canning. I think whether you use salted butter or unsalted butter, it really doesn't make a difference. I think I'm using unsalted butter today just because that's what I have. So I'm just simply stirring up those graham cracker crumbs and the butter to get that graham cracker crust, because that's kind of the basis of all the cheesecake, right? All right. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to start by filling my flatter jars, and this is a really pretty simple step. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to put, I'm going to get a bigger spoon out, I think, here to start with. But I'm going to take a nice heaping soup spoon and put that in each one of these jars. Now usually this recipe is going to make around 6 pints, or 6 half-pints, I should say. It varies a little bit from time to time. I suppose it depends on the size of the eggs and maybe how much you beat it and maybe how much cracker crumbs I really put into each jar. I can't say for sure. But that's about what I get with this recipe. So I'm going to put a little bit more cracker crumbs in each one of these jars, like so. Always good to use a funnel. I know I didn't use that on one of them, but that kind of keeps everything off of it. Then what you want to do is take those cracker crumbs and then just push them down just like you would any other cheesecake that you might make, so that you have, a fairly hard bottom and it's going to stay. I want to show you what I did and what I do when I'm using these taller jars, because it's really more difficult to get a spoon in there. So let me show you how to do that. So what I did for this, and what I find works best for this, is just to take the end of a knife and then tap it down that way, because you really can't get the end of a spoon down there. And I find that the end of a knife is, for me, the best way that worked out. And just like that, it's tapped down and it holds. So that's what I have done so far. I'm going to tap the rest of these down, and then I'm going to start blending my ingredients. So I'll be back as soon as I have these tapped down and the ingredients that my mix are put together. I have my 3 8-ounce packages of cream cheese and my 1 cup of sugar in the mixer until it's light and fluffy. I had cleaned off the batter as I was doing that so that I can make sure everything is mixed. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3 eggs, 1 at a time, making sure that those are incorporated well. So the eggs, of course, will help give the cheesecake structure. If you think about how eggs are used in either baking or even when you're just plain cooking a scrambled egg, it gets hard, it gives it structure. So I've got the 3 eggs in there, and I'm going to beat that well. Then to this, I'm going to add some vanilla, because what isn't good with vanilla, right? So I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. Get that stirred in. And then, because I want to have some acid in this, for protection if nothing else, I'm also going to add a tablespoon of lemon juice. Now if you have fresh lemon, that's fine. I don't have that right now. So I'm just going to add a tablespoon of fresh lemon juice. And I'm going to add that slowly until it's mixed in well. All right, and I'm just going to clean the edges of this a little bit. So you've got a mixture right now that's a little bit soupy looking, and that's fine because this is going to get stiff as we pressure can it. So we've got that edges cleaned off like so. And I'm going to grab a rag there because I've got a little bit spilled. Alrighty. So then to that, I'm really just going to, let's see, did I put everything in? I did. I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of sour cream. Now I have home canned sour cream, so it looks a little bit soft. Use, especially if you're a beginner, use regular sour cream that you buy at the store. And then I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of flour. Again, this is not something that's approved by the USDA. You can certainly substitute clear gel. Probably would want to use about 1/8 of a cup for that. But I'm using flour today. And really, I just want to stir those 2 things in. I don't really want to overmix that. So once that's stirred in, then I'm going to start filling my jars. And then we'll put those in the pressure canner, and I'll talk about that. So I'm going to take this, and again, just scrape the sides, scrape the beater, make sure that everything is mixed in. Don't want any clumps, so to speak, in my cream cheese or my cheesecake. And again, you know, keep in mind that when you pressure can things, your density is going to be, and your finished product is going to be a little bit different than if you bake a cheesecake or if you have a no-bake cheesecake. Just like when you have a casserole or a soup, it's a little bit different coming out of a canned jar that you've home canned versus right out of the pot of your stove. It's going to be just a little bit different. Now, I am done with this. I'm going to unplug my mixer, which I like to do for safety. And I'm going to get my beater off of my mixer, and then I'll be back as we start filling the jars. I've cleaned up a little bit and I'm ready to fill my jars. So remember, I took and I put my graham cracker crust on the bottom of all the jars, then I prepared my filling. Now what I want to do is I don't want to fill these jars more than about half full, and I'm actually choosing to put some topping on them. I'm just using, today I'm using cherry pie filling. You can put apple on it, you can put blueberry on it if you choose, that's fine. I often make some of these plain also, but my husband is a fan of cherry, so I'm going with cherry today. So, good idea to use a funnel, keeps everything off the edge. And I'm just going to take a good spoonful of filling, and I'm going to put that in the jar, like so. And then I'm going to take a look at that and know that that is about half full. So this is actually going to rise a little bit as it's cooking. And I still want to debubble this because if you look carefully, you'll still see there's some bubbles down by where the crust is. So again, I like to use the back of a wooden spoon. You can use a popsicle stick. You can use a plastic knife. What's recommended is to stay away from knives of any kind, including table knives, simply because over time they can scratch and weaken your glass. So that's why I choose to use a wooden spoon. Then I'm going to take, I have some vinegar and a clean rag, and I'm going to dip that, and I'm going to be really careful about wringing this out because I don't want vinegar to get into this because obviously that could curdle everything. And besides, who wants cheesecake that tastes like vinegar, right? So I wipe off the jar carefully because I'm dealing with fat with the cream cheese and sugar, obviously a sweetener. In this particular case, I'm going to take this first one and I'm going to put my data logger in it. I'm going to put that in sideways, like so. And then I'm actually going to add a spoonful of topping. And I'm just using a silverware tablespoonful. I'm putting that on top. Put a little bit more there, I guess. Now this might siphon just a little bit. I'm not filling this with a bunch of cherry. And you can see that that pretty much brought it to the top of this lid, pretty much to the rim here. I did take and mark my lid with an X simply because I know this is the one that has the data logger in it. Today's lids, just a reminder, you don't have to put these in hot water if they're the newer ones. What you might want to do is check the back of your box. If you have the older lids, sometimes they still need to be put in hot water first. But the newer lids have a new compound in them, and you simply want to wash them. So you put the lid on, just finger tight, and then I'm going to put it in my canner. Now, let's talk about how I'm going to can this. What I'm going to do on this is I am starting with everything cold. So I'm starting with cold water in my canner. I'm starting with cold jars, and I'm starting with a cold mixture. You don't want to bring this up too fast in heat. And you don't want to, I'm losing my train of thought here. But what you don't want to do is bring this up too fast because you could curdle everything, and you want the temperature to get where it needs to be. So again, I'm debubbling it, the cheesecake here. I'm going to take just a spoonful or two of the topping on top. I'm trying to use more of the cherries and not so much of the juice. I'm taking a lid, and I'm wiping it again with a clean cloth with the vinegar, making sure that everything is really dry and really clean. That's the best way to get a good seal. You put on your lid, and again, just make this finger tight. Get it on straight to start with. Finger tight and just a tiny little bit of movement. So I'm going to fill the rest of my jars. I'm going to put them in my canner. And I'm using an electric canner. Typically what I would do is I would warm the jars. Once everything's in my canner, I'm going to start the canner as if I'm going to warm the jars, but the jars are going to be warmed inside. That'll slowly bring up the heat of the glass and also the contents. Then my canner is going to say fill the jars, and I'm going to go ahead and push the button because the jars are filled. That'll start the process of heating the canner, getting rid of the air, and then the actual canning. I am at about 1,300 feet above sea level, so I'm going to can this for 30 minutes. If you're at sea level, you can do it for 25 minutes. If you're above 3,000 feet, then I would do it for 35 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and fill the rest of my jars. I'm going to can this, and when it's done, I will be back to show you the end result. My jars rested overnight, and they all sealed. I know that because when I push on the lids, there's no give. Now the recipe actually made, I would say, 10 to 12 half-pint containers. I pressure canned 7 of them because that's as many that fit into my pressure canner. And then I took the other part of that and I actually baked it. And I thought that made an interesting comparison. So what I want you to do, or what I want to do, is I want to open up one of these. I do have to say that I had opened one of these that had the data logger in it, and unfortunately I had a software problem with my data logger, so I was not able to record the temperature on that. So that's a disappointment. With that said, I'm comfortable that these jars got into the 240-degree mark because when I had previously pressure canned the cheesecake in these larger jars, not larger, they're still 8 ounces, but taller, it got over that 240-degree mark. So as I open this up, the one thing that I did notice, even on the one that I opened with the pressure can, is with the fruit on top, it actually created a little bit of a hole, so to speak. In other words, the fruit settled into the cheesecake. I don't see that as a problem. it's just as delicious. And when I tasted the jar that I opened with the pressure canner, I could not tell the difference between this and so the baked cheesecake really ended up being the same texture and the same flavor as the pressure canner, and I think that's really good. The other reason I think it makes sense to use these shorter jars is because when you dig into your cheesecake, you want that good graham cracker stuff, and it's pretty tough to take a spoon and dig all the way to the bottom of this. But this is delicious. It's soft, it's tasty. I can get all the way down to that graham cracker. The texture is really, really good. It's not grainy, it's light. And it's so good. So I think you can make this with fruit or without fruit. Again, you might get a settled center with the fruit. I don't see that as a problem. If you want it plain, want to add your fruit on the back end, that works also. But this recipe I'm super happy with, and I feel really comfortable that the high sugar content combined with the fact that the 240-degree temperature was reached, that this is a safe product for my family. Again, I want to remind you that this is not a tested recipe, but I think just because it's untested doesn't make it not safe. Still use good canning practices in terms of high quality ingredients, clean jars, etc. So I hope you found this helpful. I will have the printed recipe below or a link to it. I'll also have these jars. These are actually, I believe they're ball, maybe they're cur. Let's see if I have them listed on here. Yeah, I think that they're cur jars. I don't have my glasses on. Hang on 1 minute, I've checked that. But they're an 8-ounce wide mouth jar is really what you're looking for. And these are cur jars, K-E-R-R. I will have a link to these jars below. I know they're available at Walmart. And Walmart will give you free shipping if you order enough stuff. So I mean, you can order a couple boxes of these or order other things for your household. But these jars are really the jars that I think work best for not only this, but also for a lot of the cakes and some of the breads that I'm working on. So, hope you liked the video. I got a little bit away from things. I hope you subscribe to the channel so you get notified of other how-tos and recipes. In the meantime, thanks for watching and happy canning.